So your friend asks you for a favor and gives you $5 asking to buy something to eat, something to drink, something to feed his cow with, and something to plant in his garden. At the same time, you're allowed to buy just one thing. What are you going to buy? You can go and buy a watermelon. You can eat it, you can drink it, you can feed the cow with the rinds, and as for the watermelon seeds, you can easily plant them in the garden. An egg has to fall 100 feet, but you can't let it break. You can't slow down its fall or cushion its landing. How can you do it? Drop the egg from a height greater than 100 feet, and it won't break for the first 100 feet. Cracks me up. Let's imagine you don't know what an elephant looks like. One day, you're going on a safari to watch animals with your friends. One of them points at a rhino and tells you it's an elephant. The other shows you a hippo and claims that it's an elephant. Who will you believe and why? The task was to imagine that you didn't know what an elephant looked like, not that you didn't know what a hippo and a rhino are. It means you won't believe either of your friends. It's fitness day at school, and all the children ran the same distance. Each kid was ranked according to his or her own unique result. Billy turned out to be both the 50th fastest and the 50th slowest runner. How many kids are there at Billy's school? Even though 100 sounds like a clear-cut answer, it's actually 99. Billy is the 50th in the sequence from 1 to 50 of the fastest runners. If he's the 50th slowest, there has to be 99 runners ranked from 50 to 99. Mrs. Smith went to the police claiming that her vintage necklace was missing. The woman was upset. When the police arrived, they saw no signs of a break-in. No messed up locks, no misplaced doors. Only one window was broken. There was a total mess inside the house and dirty footprints all over the floor. Surprisingly, the next day, Mrs. Smith was arrested for fraud. Why? The police were sure that Mrs. Smith lied to them because the window was broken from the inside. If it had been broken from the outside, little pieces of glass would have been on the room's floor. You've been captured and kept in jail for several months. One day, you manage to open your cell and get out into the hall. There are 3 exits. A huge, vicious-looking man guards one of them. The second has angry dogs. And in front of the third exit, there's a timer ticking down to an explosion in 5 minutes. Which exit will you choose? Wait until the explosion is over and get out through the third exit. Bill and Joe have had an argument about human body capabilities and made a deal. Bill would go to Antarctica and Joe would travel to the Sahara Desert, where they'll both try to survive for 3 days without any shelter and clothes, but with plenty of food and water. Who has the better chances of survival? It's Joe. In Antarctica, the temperatures are freezing all the time, and without any cover, Bill would become an icicle in less than a day. In the Sahara, on the other hand, the extreme heat might cause blisters and even heat stroke, but only in the day. It's rather cool there at night, and water will help Joe fight any dehydration. James escaped from prison and ran for the countryside. Suddenly, on a small, deserted road, he saw a police car heading right at him. James ran toward the car for some time, then turned and rushed into the woods. Why did he run toward the car first? James was in the middle of a bridge when he saw the car. He had to run toward the vehicle to get off the bridge. Newlyweds left for their honeymoon and asked their neighbor to look after their house. When they returned, the woman found out that she'd lost all her expensive jewelry because of a power outage. The woman had hidden her jewelry in a supposedly safe place. The house wasn't robbed. The neighbor was an honest person. The jewelry got lost on accident. What happened? The wife hid her jewelry in the freezer in a bag with frozen food. After the power failure, all the food spoiled. The kind-hearted neighbor decided to help and threw away all the bad food, together with the jewelry. On a sunny, windless day, a ship was in the harbor. There were many people on the shore looking at the vessel. Suddenly, the ship started to sink fast. There was nothing wrong with it, there was no storm, and the skies were blue. And yet, the ship went down in front of the spectators. What happened? Nothing unexpected. The submarine's captain just ordered the crew to dive. You're playing ping pong when your last ball falls into a 1-foot-deep narrow metal pipe embedded in the concrete floor. How can you get the ball out of the pipe if all you have is your paddle, a bottle of water, and your shoelaces? Pour the water from your bottle into the hole, and the ball will rise to the surface. Oh, and use your shoelaces to keep your shoes on. It took 7 years to build the world's tallest skyscraper. Every year, the builders managed to double its height. How many years did it take the skyscraper to reach half its maximum height? Six years. If the constructors doubled the building's height every year, the skyscraper had to be half its final height a year before it was completed. There's a low railroad bridge in your town with a car tunnel under it. One day, you see a large truck sitting right in front of the tunnel and a confused driver walking around. You come up to him and ask what happened. It turned out that the truck is just a couple of inches taller than the allowed height. So if he drives inside, the truck will get stuck. Unfortunately, that's the only way to the driver's destination. How can he get through the tunnel? He has to let the air out of the tires. It'll make the truck lower. Lucy could only use a public telephone to make calls. One day, the phone broke. She informed the phone company, but they did nothing. The next day, she came there again and said something. The day after that, the phone was fixed. What did Lucy say? She said that people were making calls without paying. A family lived in a round hut. There were 5 people, a mother, a father, and their 3 sons. When the father came home one day, he discovered that his computer was broken. The mother was away. Mark, the oldest kid, said he was doing his homework. Jack, the middle kid, swore he was drawing. And Tom, the youngest, told father that mom had punished him and so he was standing in a corner. Who broke the computer? It was Tom, of course. A round house doesn't have any corners. There is a 1-mile-long bridge, which can only hold 5,000 pounds at one time. That's exactly the weight of the truck that's crossing it. The truck reaches the middle of the bridge and stops. Suddenly, a bird lands on the truck. Is the bridge going to collapse? The bridge isn't going to break down because the truck has already used some gas to get to the middle, and therefore weighs less than 5,000 pounds. You agreed to take part in a reality show, but it turned out to be a trap from a crazed lunatic. He tells you to dive into one of 4 tanks. The first one is swarming with venomous snakes. The second is filled with corrosive acid. Electric eels are swimming in the third one. And the fourth tank is filled with bacteria-infested water. In which tank will you have more chances of survival? Choose the tank with the bacteria. First of all, not all bacteria are harmful, and secondly, not all of them are contagious. Good luck with that. Mark got himself a new book to read. The plot was so exciting that he couldn't stop and kept reading the story until late at night. He didn't turn on the lights when it was pitch dark and there was no one to do it for him. But he still managed to read the book till the end that night. How is that possible? Mark was blind and was reading a book written in Braille. Or he could have just had an e-book. Hey, why not?
A wealthy man, Mr. Johnson, had a precious vase that he valued more than all other belongings. One day, the vase disappeared. The man was miserable. An hour after he discovered it was missing, he got a message. "If you don't come here in 10 minutes with $100,000, your vase will be broken." There was a photo attached to the message. Mr. Johnson realized it was some hotel. In that area, there were 3 of them: the Hero of California, Hummingbird, and Youth Hostel. Where should the man go? Mr. Johnson should hurry to Hummingbird. It's the only hotel that has the 7th floor. Amanda was in the middle of a burning room. The only window was small and too high for the woman to reach. There was also nothing to climb or stand on. There was no rope, neither was there a door. And still, in a matter of seconds, Amanda was outside. How is it possible? There was no door in the room. The woman just ran out through the doorway. A woman is sitting in her cabin in Ohio, but 4 hours later, she gets out of her cabin in Arizona. How did she do it? The woman is a pilot, and the cabin is actually the cockpit of the plane she flies. One night, Kevin broke into a rich house. He knew its owner had just bought a unique diamond. The thief managed to get through one of the trickiest security systems he'd ever seen. And here it was, the diamond. After grabbing the gem, Kevin got out of the house, but when he was already outside the gate, 2 security guards caught him. The guy tried to persuade the men he was only a passerby, but they didn't believe him. They searched Kevin, but found nothing. The guards were puzzled and decided the thief had swallowed the diamond. But X-ray also didn't show anything strange. The security guards had to let Kevin go. The guy got home and in a few minutes, he had the diamond in his hands. How did he smuggle it? When Kevin broke into the house, he wasn't alone. His parrot was with him. After getting the precious stone, the guy attached it to the parrot's foot, and the bird brought the diamond back home. Paul was a young but very talented chemist. He was going to attend a very important conference where he had to present his latest work. But right before the event, Paul's envious colleague locked the guy in his lab. There was no way he could get out of there on his own. In the middle of the room, there was a test tube with some bright purple liquid inside. There was also a note. This mixture will blow up in 1 minute. You've got only one chance to neutralize it with one of these ingredients. If you add the correct one, the reaction will stop. Here's the clue you'll need to figure out the needed ingredient. HIJKLMNO. And don't hope your chemical knowledge will help here. Luckily, Paul was very smart and managed to find the right ingredient before the time ran out. Which one was it? It's a row of letters from H to O. It means the needed ingredient is H2O, which is water. Two identical vans were crossing the bridge when it collapsed. The car fell into the water and started to sink. Luckily, the drivers were unharmed. But they had to find the way to the surface really fast because the vans started to fill with water. One of the men began to push the driver's door, and the other was trying to open the side door. Who has the higher chances of survival? The first driver won't be able to open the door because of the water pressure. But the side door in the second car is a sliding one. With some effort, the second driver will be able to open it and escape. One person can dig a hole within 1 day. Then, how long will it take two people to dig half a hole? There's no such thing as half a hole. Look at these pictures and try to figure out which mirror is magical. It's the one on the right. It shows the man wearing a mustache, but in real life, his face is clean-shaven. Betty was having lunch in her favorite cafe when several police officers came in. They were looking for a criminal who had escaped from the police station the day before. Betty started to look around, examining the visitors. She spotted the criminal even faster than the officers did. Who was it? Look at the barman. He's wearing handcuffs. Daniel wanted to go to the seaside with his friends in the summer, but his father reminded the guy he'd promised to help in his parents' store. When the man saw how upset his son was, he offered him a deal. Daniel had to solve several riddles, and then he'd be free to go and have fun with his friends. So, our customers often ask us to sell them something that's full of holes but can still hold water. What should we offer them? After a while, Daniel found the right answer. What's this mysterious thing? It's a sponge. Daniel's father continued, I'm thinking of introducing a new method of pricing the things we sell. Socks will cost $20. A tie will be $12. You'll have to pay $28 for a sweater. And a coat will cost $16. Based on this pricing method, how much will be a t-shirt? Do you know the answer? Daniel was confused at first, but then he realized the correct answer was $24. His father was going to charge $4 for each letter needed to spell the item of clothing. You're doing really well, Daniel's father told the guy. That's why I'll give you just one more riddle. If you crack it, you can have some rest in the summer. 81 times 9 equals 801. This equation isn't correct. What can you do to make it true? This riddle took Daniel quite a while. And how fast can you solve it? All Daniel had to do was turn the equation upside down. Luckily, the guy managed to figure it out. He got 108 equals 6 times 18. Jason was a courier who regularly delivered food and other stuff to Mrs. Brown. The elderly lady really liked him a lot. She trusted him enough to let the guy use her spare key. The lady kept it under her doormat. When Mrs. Brown was away, Jason would take this key and leave everything he brought inside. One day, the guy came to the woman's house and found out the key wasn't in its usual place. He rang the bell, and a man he'd never seen before opened the door. I'm an electrician, he said. I was fixing some lighting problems in the living room, and the elderly lady is resting now. Jason immediately called the police. Why? The criminal entered the house with the help of the spare key. Paul came back from his lunch break and saw that someone had spilled coffee all over his documents. He cried out, and this attracted his boss's attention. The man decided to figure out who had spoiled Paul's work. He asked his subordinates what they had been doing during their lunch break. Nancy and Liza said they had been together. They went to a cafe to get some coffee. Brian explained that he'd felt unwell. That's why he decided to take a walk in the park. And Sandra said that she'd been talking to her boyfriend on the phone. The boss immediately realized who was lying. Can you figure it out? It was Sandra. There's a sign on the wall that prohibits the employees to use their phones in the office. It means the girl couldn't be speaking with her boyfriend. A wealthy businessman disappeared right from his home one afternoon. His wife called the police. The detective arrived and questioned everyone who was in the house at that time. The cook said that she'd been preparing dinner and hadn't left the kitchen. The maid claimed she had been cleaning the dining room after the businessman and his wife had had lunch. And the wife said that after lunch, she'd been sunbathing and swimming in the pool. The detective immediately realized who was behind the man's disappearance. Do you know the answer? It was the wife. Look outside. It's late fall and there's no water in the swimming pool. Jeffrey was on a plane, ready to have his first parachute jump, when he started to panic. Without putting on his parachute, the guy jumped out of the plane, and still, he remained absolutely unharmed. How is it possible? The plane was still on the ground. There's a large apple tree growing on a cliff. If a powerful wind is blowing towards the land, where will the apples fall? In any case, they will fall down. A woman went out of the airport. She hailed a taxi and gave the directions to the driver. As soon as they drove off, the woman started to talk. Her blabbering annoyed the driver. He turned to her and said, "I can't hear what you're saying. I'm almost deaf." The woman was shocked and didn't open her mouth for the rest of the ride. Only after she got out of the taxi did she realize the man had lied to her. How did the woman understand it? If the driver had hearing problems, he wouldn't have been able to follow her directions. Detective James was invited to Long Hill College, where more and more students had their things stolen. The detective was asked to investigate these cases. In a week's time, the man had 3 suspects. "What were you doing when the last theft happened?" he asked them. Thomas said, "That day I was away. I had to take my younger sister to her rehearsals." Amanda replied, "I spent that day in the library, getting ready for my presentation." And Ryan said, "This summer, I'm going to Denmark with my parents. That's why I spend all my free time learning Dutch." Detective James immediately understood who was lying. Can you figure it out? It was Ryan. They speak Danish in Denmark. Dutch is the language of the Netherlands. Jason works in the same company as Amy, a bright and lovely girl. The guy has had a crush on Amy since they first met. To attract the girl's attention, Jason agrees to take part in the Brain Challenge game organized by their company. The first task is to crack a rebus puzzle. Jason is given a piece of paper. That's what he sees there. It doesn't take the guy long to figure out the answer. What is it? It's broken promises. Jason is one of the few who gave the correct answer. He moves to the next level. He finds himself in a room full of random stuff. There, he needs to find an object that would be the answer to the following question. What goes up when the rain goes down? Look around and help Jason find the needed object. The guy chose a red and white umbrella, and that was the right answer. His next challenge was to get out of a basement. There are no windows there. Jason sees just one door with a letter combination lock. The only thing that can probably give him some hint is a note he finds in the farthest corner. P plus 3, N minus 1, B minus 1, N plus 4, S plus 1. What's the code word? Jason needed more time to crack this riddle, but he managed to get out of the basement. The code word was SMART. The key to this riddle was hidden in the alphabet. P plus 3 following letters is S. N minus 1 letter is M, and so on. Jason is amazed to find out he's one of the 2 contestants to make it to the finals. Now, he has to do his best to win. The guy comes up to the table with 3 cups on it, but only one of these drinks is safe to try. The other 2 are poisoned. And even though a mistake won't cost Jason his life, the consequences will be unpleasant. The drinks are tea with sugar, cappuccino, and hot chocolate. Which one should Jason choose? If it was indeed sugar in the tea, it would have melted completely. But it didn't happen. Cappuccino looks suspiciously green. It's probably unsafe to drink. Jason opted for the hot chocolate and won the challenge. Now, Amy will definitely notice him. 3 people are hiding in bathroom stalls. Try to figure out who's a pregnant woman. It's the one wearing the untied sneakers. It's often difficult for pregnant women to bend over to lace up their footwear. 2 people were born at the same moment, but they don't celebrate their birthdays on the same day. How is it possible? They were born in different time zones. In one of these zones, it was already the next day. Detective Brown was having dinner in his kitchen. Suddenly, he heard screams coming from his neighbor's house. He rushed there. The door was open. When he ran inside, he saw a paramedic bending over a lying man. Once the doctor saw the detective, he exclaimed, "He fell down the stairs. Luckily, he's just unconscious. I need to take him to the hospital." Detective Brown didn't need to think twice. He called the ambulance and arrested the man on the spot. Why? When the detective was running towards the neighbor's house, he didn't see any car outside. Then how did the paramedic get there? And how did he know his help was needed? You don't have them when you're born, but you get them later. In several years, you don't have them anymore. But then they come again, but in a different form. Many years later, they might leave you again. What are they? They are your teeth. A criminal appeared in a small town, and 2 young women went missing. Right now, the 3rd girl is being taken away. When she comes to her senses, she finds herself in a well with 2 other girls. The well isn't particularly deep, so they decide to try to get out of it. The shortest and slimmest of them climbs on top of the other 2, but she can't reach the edge of the well. What can the girls do to get out of there? The tallest of the girls should climb on top. She has the longer arms and will easily reach the edge of the well. You get lost in the woods in the middle of the winter. Suddenly, you see a cabin. It's dark and cold inside. There is just 1 candle on the table and a wood-burning stove in the corner. You pull out your matchbox and see there's only 1 match left. What should you light first? The match, of course. It was winter when an elderly couple finished building a pretty new house. The husband was responsible for the construction, while his wife was a self-appointed decorator. The house looked beautiful. Very proud, they invited their teenage grandchildren to have a look at their work. But within an hour, 1 guy and 2 girls managed to break several windows. They also knocked down the fence, removed the decorations, and ruined the roof. But the most bizarre thing, the retired couple didn't seem to mind. They just smiled looking at the teenagers. Can you figure out what was going on? The grandparents made a gingerbread house and invited their grandchildren to eat it. 5 costs $25 and 25 $50. If you buy 255, you'll pay $75. What is it that you buy and how much does one item cost? You're buying door numbers, and one of them costs $25. On a rainy Monday morning, a car hit a woman at the crosswalk and sped away without stopping. Luckily, the woman wasn't badly hurt. She even managed to describe the vehicle before being taken to a hospital. It was a green van. The accident happened in a small town. That's why the police figured out easily that there were just 3 cars like that. They found and questioned all the car owners. Gary said, "My sister took part in a concert in another town. I gave her a lift and waited for the show to finish to drive her back." Angela explained to the police she'd been busy with some household chores, gardening, washing her van, and the like. Larry answered he was ill. That's why he spent the whole day in bed drinking hot tea. The police officers understood who was lying right away. Who was it? It was a rainy day. Washing a car and gardening when it's raining? Not the best idea. Angela must be lying. A man was in an 8-story building when a fire started. He jumped out the window but didn't even bruise himself. How is it possible? The man jumped out of the first floor window. 2 people are standing near the river. Both of them want to get to the opposite side, but the boat can carry only one of them. It's summer and the river isn't frozen. And still, they manage to get to the other bank. How? They are on opposite sides of the river. One town had a weird law. All the men leaving there had to be clean-shaven, but no man was allowed to shave himself. The only person in the town who was licensed to shave them was a 40-year-old barber. But then, who shaved the barber? There was no need. The barber was a woman. A mother promised her son to pay him $60 per hour if he washed his hands for 6 seconds before eating a meal. The son did that, and his mom gave him his well-earned money. But the boy got upset. Why? Because he received just 10 cents.
Private Detective Deborah was doing some shopping at the mall. Suddenly, she heard people arguing. The woman went there and saw a stressed shop assistant and several people crowding him. The poor man had found a smartphone and made an announcement, and now several people claimed it was their phone. One man said the phone must have slipped from his bag. A young woman said the gadget belonged to her, and an older woman shouted it was her husband's device. That's when the phone rang. For some reason, the shop assistant handed it to Deborah. The woman glanced at the screen and immediately gave the phone to the man. How did she understand whose device it was? Deborah saw the word wife written on the screen. Emily has 2 glasses filled with water. In the first glass, the water is heated up to 100 degrees. In the second glass, the water is cooled down to minus 100 degrees. The girl drops 2 coins in the glasses at the same time. Which coin will reach the bottom faster? It'll be the coin in the glass with the warm water. The coin in the other glass won't sink at all. The water there is frozen. Jacob and his brother Jack were walking along the street. When they passed a grocery store, Jacob pointed at a young woman and exclaimed, "Oh, my niece is over there." His brother answered, "Oh, right, but it's not my niece." "How come?" The young woman is Jack's daughter. Ashley had a boyfriend, Mark, who was madly in love with her. Unfortunately, the woman didn't love him back. Once, she decided to leave him. Ashley knew Mark wouldn't let her go easily, so she ran away. But Mark was a very rich man and could find her almost anywhere. She had to be careful. 1 week later, Ashley was sitting in her hotel room when she heard a knock at the door. When the woman opened the door, she saw a man. She had never met him before. The stranger apologized. "Oops, I'm sorry, my bad. I was sure it was my room." He then turned around, went down the corridor, and disappeared in the elevator. Ashley rushed back into her room and started to pack her things. She instantly knew Mark had found her. How did she figure it out? No one will knock on their own hotel room door. It was Mark's man who was looking for her. The faster you run, the harder it is to catch this thing. What is it? It's your breath. David and his wife Jessica moved to another town. The place wasn't big. For the locals, new people coming to live there was a big deal. That's why, the next day, the couple's curious neighbors came to say hello. Karen introduced herself and said she was sure they'd become great friends. She had even cooked cupcakes for David and Jessica. Elderly Mrs. Latham told the newcomer she'd been living in the town for almost 80 years. Betty was extremely excited. "A man's come to live in our small town. And so good-looking at that. Awesome news." 2 of the neighbors seemed a bit creepy, and only one looked normal. Who was it? Karen had decorated her cupcakes with something that looked suspiciously like eyes. Betty is too enthusiastic about David. As for Mrs. Latham, she is sure to know lots of things about the town and its inhabitants. She can be a useful source of information, and she cooked them some soup. Brandon's wife told him to cook several eggs, but the man had to boil them for exactly 2 minutes. She left her husband 3 hourglass timers for 3, 4, and 5 minutes. How can the man boil the eggs for exactly 2 minutes? Brandon waited until the water started to boil. Then he turned over the 3 and 5 minute timers. When the 3-minute timer ran out, he dropped the eggs into the water. And when the 5-minute timer ran out, he had his perfectly boiled eggs. It was the first time Eric sailed his brand new yacht. But the man seemed to be out of luck that day. A bad storm sank the yacht, and Eric hardly had any time to make it to the surface. Half conscious, he ended up on some beach. In the morning, the man realized he was stranded on a tiny, uninhabited island. No radio, no cell phone, no means of communication whatsoever, and the island had no trees to make a smoke signal. On the 3rd day, Eric noticed a small plane circling in the sky over the island. Were they searching for him? But the aircraft was flying too high, and the pilot couldn't see Eric. And still, the man did something, and soon he was picked up by a rescue helicopter. How did he attract the pilot's attention? Eric picked up some stones and used them to write SOS on the sand. Helen lives in Singapore with her husband Dennis. Once, she tells her husband she wants to visit her aunt who lives in Italy. Dennis doesn't mind, but he asks his wife to send him a photo as soon as she gets to Europe. When Helen lands in Rome, she sends Dennis a selfie. Under the picture, she writes, "Ciao from Italy, I've just arrived." After looking at the photo, Dennis realizes his wife lied to him. How did he know? In the picture, the clock on the wall shows exactly the same time as the clock in the kitchen, which is in Singapore. If Helen was in Rome, the clock would show a big time difference. One day, Christopher decided he had to develop his logical thinking skills. The guy found a tutor and started visiting him to have private lessons. But this teacher had one interesting habit. Closer to the end of each lesson, he always gave Christopher several riddles. The guy wasn't allowed to go home until he solved them. This Friday, the first riddle went like this. How can you make 6 into an odd number? Tricky. How? He removed the letter S and got IX. That's 9 in Roman numerals. But the guy knew it was just the beginning. The next riddle was even more difficult. It's thin, but when water splashes it, none seeps through. When hit, it changes color. It covers an incredibly complex thing, yet it's very easy to flex. What is it? At first, Christopher didn't have any idea. Duh, he'd have to stay and crack riddles till midnight. Luckily, in a moment, it dawned on him. It's the skin. Christopher's tutor was impressed with the guy's progress. Okay, he said, one more riddle and you can go home. 3 doctors said that Ryan was their brother, but Ryan claimed he didn't have any brothers. Who was lying? Christopher figured out right away that everyone was telling the truth. All the doctors were Ryan's sisters. Whew, he could finally go home. The morning after a heavy snowfall, Justin went outside and stopped in his tracks. He saw there was twice as much snow on top of his garage as there was on his neighbor's. Still, Justin didn't get surprised or upset. Why? Justin's garage is twice as big as his neighbor's. No wonder it also has twice as much snow. Amy went on holiday to the seaside and met 3 guys there. They were friends, but it didn't stop all of them from trying to impress the girl. In the evening, they all met in a restaurant to have dinner, and the guys started to tell Amy about their adventures. Sam boasted, "I'm a pilot, and I've already traveled all over the world." Larry said, "I once took part in an expedition to the North Pole. It was amazing. I saw penguins and polar bears." Jerry barged in, "And I'm an astronaut. When I was in space last time, I went on a spacewalk. I wanted to see our planet from above, but I was almost blown away by a strong wind." Who's lying to make a better impression? Both Larry and Jerry are lying. Penguins live near the South Pole, and there's no wind in outer space. It's an almost perfect vacuum. Andrew and Gary are twins. They were born just 1 minute apart, and Andrew is the elder of the two. But for some mysterious reason, they celebrate their birthdays 2 days apart once every several years. How is this possible? Andrew was born at 11:59 p.m. on February 28. It wasn't a leap year. So Gary, who appeared just 1 minute later, was already born on March 1st. That's why, during leap years, they have 2 days between their birthdays. A famous scientist went missing. The last time his colleagues saw him, he was in his laboratory. When the police arrived, they found a calendar lying on the man's table. There were several numbers written in pencil at the bottom: 6, 4, 9, 10, 11. The police officers had 5 suspects: David, Sarah, Jason, Betty, and Kevin. Who is behind the scientist's disappearance? It's Jason. The numbers stand for months, and the first letter of each month spells the name of the criminal. So the 6th month is June, and the first letter of June is J. The 4th month is April, and the first letter of April is A, and so on. Smarty pants.
2 teen sisters, Maya and Ariana, were supposed to study in the library, but one of them went to a party instead. When they came back home, their parents could immediately tell who hadn't been to the library. Can you? It was Maya. Look, there's glitter in her hair. Mr. Harris is a landlord. In his building, it's prohibited to have any pets, but he keeps hearing some barking on the 3rd floor. There are 3 apartments there, So he decides to pay a visit to everyone who lives on that floor: Mr. Walker, Ms. Clark, and Mr. Allen. Can you tell who keeps a dog? It's Mr. Allen. Take a look at the shoe rack. Some of his shoes are chewed. 4 friends were going to another city by car, but at some point, something distracted the driver, and they got in a car crash. A police officer arrived and started the investigation. He asked who had been driving, but no one took the blame. Then, the officer inspected the car. Can you tell who the driver was? The driver was the red-haired girl. There's a sweater on the driver's seat. She's the only one not wearing a jacket or sweater, so it must be hers. Mrs. Miller was waiting for a delivery, but she never got it. And since the woman had to go to work, she asked her husband to drive to the post office and ask about her package. When Mrs. Miller came back home, Mr. Miller said he'd just returned from the post office, but they said the package hadn't arrived yet. Mrs. Miller didn't believe him and claimed he hadn't driven anywhere. How did she understand it? Take a look at the car. It's all covered in snow. To go to the post office, Mr. Miller would have to clean it first. In a parallel universe, you're only allowed to have fun and eat candy. No one ever reads or studies. Mrs. Relham came back home after a long and entertaining day at the club. Her 3 daughters were supposed to have a lot of fun on their own. She asked them what they had been doing. Hannah said she'd been watching TV all day long. Ellie answered she'd spent the day at a water park. Ava told her mom she and her friends had a candy-eating contest. Still, Mrs. Relham could tell one of her daughters was lying. That daughter spent all day studying. Who was it? It was Hannah. Take a closer look at her hands. There are some ink stains. If she had actually watched TV, she wouldn't have needed a pen. In June, students of the Faculty of Economics had their econometrics exam. It was the hardest one in that semester, and everyone was worried. On the day of the exam, the students entered the classroom. Everyone was assigned to a specific seat. A professor was sure one of the students was going to cheat, so he made that person sit right in front of him. Which student was it, and how did the professor know? It's the guy with dark hair. It's June, and all the students are lightly dressed. Still, this student is wearing a sweater with long sleeves. He must be up to something. Now take a look at these 3 students: Savannah, Melody, and Scarlett. One of them managed to cheat at the exam, and no one noticed it. Can you tell who it was and how she managed to use her notes? It was Scarlett. She's wearing long boots. That's where she kept her notes. Michelle was having a house party. She noticed that her brother had disappeared and went upstairs to find him. When she neared his room, she heard laughter. Her brother was in there with some girl. But Michelle couldn't figure out who it was. She got very curious, so after they left, she sneaked into his room to look for some hints. She suspected 3 girls: Lily, Sydney, and Nicole. Michelle immediately guessed who her brother was dating. Who was it? Her brother is dating Nicole. There's an earring on the couch, and Nicole is wearing only 1 earring, which looks exactly the same. She must have lost it. Can you tell which student in the classroom isn't a real person? The guy in the middle doesn't cast a shadow. There's definitely something fishy about him. Michael had a crush on Ellie, the girl he studied with. One day, he decided to write her a note, asking her out. Unfortunately, he didn't remember which desk was Ellie's. Can you tell which one Michael needs? Take a look at Ellie's photo. She's waving her left hand, which means she's likely left-handed. There's only one desk where the pen is to the left of the copybook. It must be Ellie's desk. A grocery store manager found out that someone had been stealing bananas from the store all the time. The man conducted his own investigation and got 3 suspects. But he couldn't accuse the customers until he was 100% sure. Take a look at these people and say who the banana thief is. Look at the guy wearing a top hat. It's a perfect place for hiding and stealing stuff. He must be the thief. Brandon and Genevieve are on their working trip to London. They decided to meet in a cafe in the evening. Now, they're both driving there. Can you tell which of them isn't smart? Brandon. In England, people drive on the left side of the road, and he's driving on the right. Early in the morning, a big sum of money went missing from the accountant's safe in the office. Only 3 people were at work at that time. Haley, the accountant, said she'd left for a couple of minutes to go to the bathroom. Eric, the software manager, claimed he'd had his lunch break and hadn't seen anything. Joseph, the cleaning man, said he'd been cleaning the 2nd floor at the time. Can you figure out who's lying? It's Eric. He couldn't have a lunch break. It was still early in the morning. Someone had been stealing food from a grocery store. The manager couldn't find out who it was and hired a detective. Look at the security camera footage for the last year and say who the thief is. It's the dark-haired pregnant lady. It's been a year and she's still pregnant. Plus, the size of her belly has never changed. It must be fake. Theo was spending the day with her boyfriend Derek. After lunch, he said he had some urgent business to deal with and left her for a couple of hours. When Derek came back, Theo realized he'd been cheating on her and broke up with him. How did she find out? Take a closer look at Derek's neck. There's a lipstick stain. It's red, while Theo is wearing pink lipstick, which means it's not hers. Mr. Roberts, one of the best surgeons in the country, came to his insurance company. The man said he'd been robbed right in the street. The assistant asked if Mr. Roberts remembered any specific details about the criminal. He said he didn't. Everything happened too fast, and he had very bad eyesight. The assistant refused to start the investigation. He said Mr. Roberts was lying. He wasn't actually robbed. Why didn't the man believe Mr. Roberts? Mr. Roberts is a surgeon, but it's not possible to work as one if you have poor eyesight. It means Mr. Roberts lied. In a small town, someone stole all the chicken nuggets from a local store. The owner called the police, and they started the investigation. There were 3 suspects who were in the store at around that time. Mrs. Wilson said her family was vegetarian. She wouldn't be interested in chicken nuggets. Mr. Martin said he'd needed to return home very fast. He had to take a conference call. He didn't have any time to waste. Mr. Thomas simply stated that he hadn't stolen anything. Can you tell who the thief is? The thief is Mrs. Wilson. She said her family was vegetarian, but behind her back, there's a freshly cooked chicken on the table. Esme was having a walk in the forest. After it started to get dark, the girl tried to find her way back home, but got lost. Finally, she came across a witch's house and asked the woman to help her find her way home. The witch only agreed to do so on one condition. She gave Esme a piece of string and said,
"Put it anywhere. If I can step over it, I'll keep you with me forever. If I don't manage to do it, I'll show you the way home."
What can Esme do? Esme should put the string right next to the wall. This way, the witch won't be able to step over it. Take a close look at the picture and figure out who the thief is. Look at this guy. His right hand is inside the woman's bag.
So check this out. 3 men are sitting around a table drinking coffee. They all look alike, but only 2 of them are brothers. The third one just doesn't belong at all because he's an alien. Who is it? It's the man sitting on the right. He's got 12 fingers. Yeah, the one sitting in the center has some weird ears, but look at the family portrait on the wall. His dad has the very same ears. Gabrielle is a shop assistant in a department store. Right now, there are 3 people in the fitting rooms. There's Jessica, the woman wearing a green dress, Sean, a man wearing a leather jacket and skinny jeans, and Alex, the man who's trying on a larger-sized pair of jeans that Gabrielle just brought him. One of the clients is an alien. Help Gabrielle figure it out. Who's the alien? It's Alex. Take a closer look at his feet. Only a reptile or an alien would have feet like that. Jessica was walking through the dark woods. Suddenly, she saw a castle. Probably belonged to a witch or something. She was pretty curious and wanted to snoop around, but the door was locked. There was a note with a secret code attached to the gate, but she still needed to decipher it. If you want to enter my castle, crack this code. Can you crack this code? The answer is witch. 2 stars after wing means you need to get rid of the last 2 letters. Same goes for the word tea. For the word chair, you need to cut off the last 3 letters. See? Eric went to the supermarket and grabbed 2 oranges and a watermelon. It cost him $6. Helen went to the same supermarket. She grabbed a lemon, an orange, and a watermelon. She paid $8. The oranges, lemons, and watermelons all have different prices. What's more expensive, an orange or a lemon? The lemon's more expensive. Eric had 2 oranges and a watermelon, which cost him $6. The 2 fruits have different prices, so it can't be 2 plus 2 plus 2. The only possible combination is 1 plus 1 plus 4. So the watermelon cost $4. Helen paid $4 for the watermelon and $1 for the orange. So now we know a lemon costs $3. David and Hannah got stranded on a tiny uninhabited island. They had no radio or cell phones, so they couldn't call for help. There were no trees on the island, so they couldn't even make a smoke signal. Suddenly, Hannah noticed a plane circling the sky, searching for them. But it was flying too high. There was no way the pilot could see them. That's when she got a bright idea. Soon after, the plane spotted them and picked them up. What was Hannah's idea? She used rocks to spell out SOS on the sand. 3 turtles are walking one behind the other. The first one says, "There are 2 turtles behind me." The second one says, "There's 1 turtle behind me and another one right in front of me." The third one says, "There are 2 turtles in front of me and 1 more right behind me." Now, how's that possible? Well, they're walking in a circle, very slowly. On a farm, there's a cow, 2 horses, and a cat. Farmer Jack drives up to his farm accompanied by his dog, Fluffy. How many feet are there on the farm? There are only two. Cows and horses have hooves. Dogs and cats have paws. Only Jack has feet. You find yourself trapped in a medieval castle far away from civilization. Boy, your vacation isn't turning out as planned. You can't jump out the window because it's too high off the ground. The only tree near the window doesn't look sturdy enough for you to climb on down. However, there are 3 doors, one of which can lead you to freedom. Behind the first door is a fierce fire. Behind the second door are hundreds of venomous snakes. And behind the third door, there's a pitch-black maze. Who knows what surprises are waiting for you there? So, which door should you choose? The third door. You just need to break off a tree branch, turn it into a torch by lighting it in the first room, and go through the maze. At least you'll be able to see where you're going. Maria lives in Paris, and once every 2 weeks she goes to Saint-Tropez to see her grandmother. She bought a ticket from the machine, finished her coffee, and headed to the train. But this weekend, something went wrong. She didn't make it to Saint-Tropez. Why not? She bought the wrong ticket. It says Saint-Tropez, Paris, but she needed Paris, Saint-Tropez. When she tried to get on the train, the conductor immediately told her she had the wrong ticket, and she just didn't have enough time to change it. Emma's a big fan of all things pink. She lives in a 1-story pink house. She has a pink cat, a pink dog, a pink hamster, pink walls, pink doors, and even a pink fridge. What color are her stairs? She doesn't have stairs. She lives in a 1-story house. But that house sure gets a lot of stares from the neighbors. Mark got to take part in a TV show where he had to answer some tough questions. He was doing really great and managed to answer 14 out of 15 questions. He was real nervous. Only one more question and he'd hit the grand prize, $1 million. What is as large as an elephant but doesn't even weigh an ounce? Mark shouted out an answer, and now he's a millionaire. What was his guess? It's shadow. It's as large as an elephant, but it's weightless. Ice melts when you heat it up. But if you heat me, I solidify. You have 7 seconds to figure out what I am. I'm an egg. Hey, don't crack me up. Paulo was on a mission to take some nature pics for his blog. As he was walking through the forest, he fell into a deep pit. He tried to climb out, but when he grabbed onto a rock, it broke off and water started to pour in. The pit was filling up fast. Paulo saw a deflated ball, an empty barrel, and a piece of wooden board. What should he use to get out of the pit? The deflated ball is too small and has a slit in one side. The wooden board wouldn't support his weight. The best option is the empty barrel. It might just keep Paulo afloat. Anthony majored in accounting at the university. His roommates wanted to test his intelligence. They took 3 envelopes and wrote some messages on them. Then, they put the answers to Anthony's upcoming exam in one of the envelopes. Only one envelope has a truthful message written on it. The other 2 are lies. Anthony isn't allowed to open the envelopes before choosing. The first message read, "There are no exam answers here." The second read, "The exam answers are here." And the third message read, "The exam answers aren't in the second envelope." Which envelope has the exam answers in it? The first envelope has the answers in it. The first and second envelopes are lies. The third one's telling the truth. A man was driving along a country road when one of his tires burst. While changing it, he accidentally lost all 4 wheel nuts. The road was deserted and the driver was afraid he'd be stuck out there all night. But an old lady walking by said something to him that changed his luck for the better. What advice did she give him? She told him to remove 1 nut from each of the other wheels and use them for the 4th tire. This way, he could get to the nearest service station. King Archibald had no one who could inherit his throne. That's why he decided to hold a contest to find a worthy successor. He gave a seed to every participant and announced that the person who grew the healthiest and most beautiful plant would become the next king or queen. On the final day of the competition, the king saw hundreds of people with plants of all sizes and shapes, but he ignored them all. He ended up choosing a lady holding a pot with nothing in it but moist dirt. How come she won? The king was a kind and honest man and wanted his heir to have the same qualities. He gave the participants tiny pebbles, not seeds. That's how he figured out the lady was the only honest one there. 4 men are lined up on several steps, all of them facing in the same direction. A brick wall separates the 4th man from the rest. Man 1 can see man 2 and 3. Man 2 can see man 3. All man 3 sees is the wall, and man 4 can't see anyone. They're all wearing hats, and they know that 2 of the hats are white and 2 are black. Which man will be the first to figure out and shout out the color of the hat he's wearing? Obviously, the men aren't allowed to turn around, talk to each other, or take their hats off. It'll be man 2. Man 3 and man 4 can't see any other hats. Man 1 sees 1 black hat and 1 white hat, so his hat can be either white or black. Man 2 only sees 1 black hat, but he realizes that if he were also wearing a black hat, Man 1 would know his hat was white. And since Man 1 hasn't said anything, Man 2 must be wearing a white hat. And if you figured all that out, well, my hat's off to you.